right, guys, welcome aboard. How are you? Welcome into a Saturday afternoon here in another of our discussion group live streams. So glad to be welcoming EJ Davis here with us this afternoon. EJ, welcome, welcome, welcome. Got you up live there. And, of course, the nearly famous and always amazing MickityyyMike is with us. Real glad to have Mike on board this afternoon. Guys, how you doing? Welcome.
I'm doing fantastic. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And Mike, great to see you. You've had some real busy weeks going on.
Yeah, unfortunately, life has kind of slapped me in the face, but that's how it goes. And
Yep.
we're here though.
We'll get through it all together for sure. Cap Zip is here. Fly by Mo. CST Gaming. Sorry, couldn't make it today. CST. Well, you know what, buddy? You've got stuff going on. As a matter of fact, I think we're probably going to try to pop pop your live stream up in here sometime. I'll dial that up. Let's see. Sticks is in the chat. Big Blue. Al's is out there. Maybe he'll comment some on the side as he can, but he could not make it in here today. Let's see. Butterflies. Let's see. What does he say? How you not? Oh, he's talking to owls. Okay. Talons Aviation is here. Isaac, brother Isaac Johnson is in, and Butterflies once again. Want to welcome you all here. We're going to make sure to get your questions in there in chat, and got a few topics to talk about today. And we're going to start out by doing, of course, our normal introduction. Everybody knows me and Mike, at least for the most part. So we'll go to EJ first. EJ, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your streaming experience, your flight sim experience, and most importantly, VATSIM stuff you do. And we're so grateful for you guys who provide us with all that great ATC through the VATSIM community. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about EJ.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Well, first of all, again, a pleasure to be joining you guys. I've been associated with VATSIM since I was in middle school, so we're looking at over 15 years with VATSIM. I have been working primarily with the Americas team and the supervisor department. So any of the events that you see going on, like Cross the Land or the larger scale events that take place in the Americas, that's me and my team that work on those. And then also with the supervisor department, making sure that we are helping our new members and enforcing the code of conduct. So you guys will definitely see me from time to time on the network. Within aviation, I've never actually gotten my private pilot's license, always wanted to, but that has further bolstered the amount of time that I spend on the simulator. So I started with FS 98 and worked all the way up to where we are now in MSFS. So awesome seeing all the changes as they've come along. I definitely think that I'm really excited for what's coming around the corner too with MSFS 2024. But otherwise, that's been my experience so far with VATSIM and with FlightSim.
Yeah. EJ, can you tell us a little bit about some of the history of VATSIM, how it got started, maybe what you know? It's kind of an impromptu question here, but tell us a little bit about what you know about the history of VATSIM.
Oh boy, that's a good question. There was an organization prior to VATSIM that I failed to remember the name of it, but it was some issues related to the governance that created a disruption in how the online network was going to play out, and it created two of the biggest networks out of that disruption. That was IVAO and VATSIM. And VATSIM overall has been the one that wanted to stick with more standards and learning for controllers before they were able to get on positions. If anybody here is familiar with IVAO, you'll know that IVAO has a very much open policy towards being able to start staffing and controlling positions. Whereas if you're on VATSIM, you know that there's a lot of training that is involved in making sure that you are up to par in each of the facilities that you work on, whether that be in Miami or Jamaica or London. The standards are different. So with that kind of approach to it, VATSIM had in the early days been the smaller of the two networks. IVAO was larger, but as time went on, VATSIM, which was, by the way, an Australian organization, continued to grow and really take a seat with the folks in the United States area. And that is what drove the growth of VATSIM is that shift from the Australian first organization to being global and being really something that the United States really got involved in. And out of that, we saw some of the best developers of VATSIM come in through the Boston RTech. We're looking at the early days like FSN and VRC as being some of the first really groundbreaking technologies that came out, and that further drove the growth, having this very nice connected platform. Of course, vPilot came later. The same developers who worked on FSN and worked on VRC are the ones who were behind that. And really, VATSIM had hit a point where they were kind of stagnant. They were just the largest network and not really big competitors. And then there was the addition of POSCON. That was, I think, 2020-ish, just around the time of the pandemic, at its peak of the pandemic, and that drove VATSIM to realize, hey, we're getting a little bit stagnant here. We need to grow our technology, grow the use of technology within our individual departments, but specifically with the tech side of things. And that saw vPilot get its updates and get a very cleaner audio system, one that was more reliable, and that really helped us to drive the growth to where we are now. And now it's a very, very interesting time to be on VATSIM, because with MSFS being as popular as it is, this is the first time we're seeing so many new and younger members. So with FS 2004 and FSX, it was really the people who were already into aviation. Well, with MSFS and all of the beautiful scenery it provides and the easy connectivity to Xbox and other things, we're seeing this influx of younger users who are just finding out about aviation. So on VATSIM, that's been awesome to see so many new connections. But at the same time, it's also been where we're helping to now work on the training part of things, helping the pilot experience and the controller experience get better by means of the pilot training department, and doing some remedial training with controllers to make sure that they're able to handle these newer and younger members as they are joining the network and have an enjoyable experience for everybody.
That's so important. And, the community has been, just for instance, in my case, very welcoming to me, the flight sim community, the streaming community, especially Mike and Al's. And they're some of the ones that I just happened across looking for something to help me pass the time when I was convalescing from knee surgery and shoulder surgery last year, which they're familiar with the story. But, that's the thing that I find that is one of the most important things, is welcoming in these new people, teaching them, helping them to learn. You got to know a little bit. You really should practice up a little bit, listen in before you maybe start participating fully in the VATSIM community. And you've touched on a really lot of important points there that I think would be good for us to explore today. Mike, I want you to go ahead and jump in and give a little brief synopsis about yourself, but let's continue to talk about VATSIM. And Mike, I'm going to let you moderate the questions in chat. I saw that Dom had one, so I'll let you kind of point on that. But go ahead, and for those who may be just tuning in to this podcast, YouTube cast for the first time, tell us a little bit about MickityyyMike, and then go ahead and let's get rolling here.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, as most know, my name is Mike. I go by MickityyyMike on YouTube, but my name is Michael. I started live streaming on YouTube flight simulation content back in September of last year. I'm a little shy of over 840 subs right now, so we're coming up to that 1K mark. But as of recent, things have kind of taken a toll IRL, where I've had to kind of put streaming on the back burner for a bit. I think my last stream I did was about a week ago, and I haven't been able to stream since because work has just been unbelievably too busy for me to juggle life at home and planning our wedding with my fiance and I, Mama Mikey, as people call her in my chat, and work and etc. It's just I had my 10-year high school reunion last night as well, so I had that being planned as well. So I just put a lot of things this week that have kind of had to put streaming on the back burner for me. Most importantly with work, just trying to get my schedule changed so I have a little bit more of a convenient streaming time for my viewers and for those that tune in and all that kind of stuff. So been just trying to acclimate my body to now going back to working overnights, as I haven't worked overnights in, gosh, 3-4 years. So, but when it comes down to VATSIM, you know, I same as CJ, I've been a part of VATSIM for the better part of 10 years now. You know, I've seen all the major changes that they've made when it comes to just the betterment of the client and all that kind of stuff for flight simmers. Like I was around when the VATSIM voice codec changed from the original codec that was originally, you know, released with VATSIM to what it is now. Because I don't know if anybody in chat remembers the original VATSIM codec, but it was well before the time that we were actually flying on VATSIM. So you know, when it came to getting onto VATSIM, you know, you always have those jitters about connecting to that client for the first time and hearing the air traffic controllers and the other airplanes around in the airspace and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it was very what's the word I'm looking for? It felt natural, you know. It felt very like a space. There was a space of comfortability because the controllers that I was dealing with at the time when I first connected to the client in Vegas out of the LA RTC, they were very helpful and very understanding that I was new to the service and was learning and all that kind of stuff. And I granted, you know, I already knew when it came down to SIDS and stars and understanding procedures and the airplane that I'm flying and all that kind of stuff. So that made it a little bit easier for me. But when I got into streaming and met EJ, you know, I got to understand the expansion of the different areas of VATSIM and understanding the Caribbean division and doing more flying out there and all that kind of stuff, and actually getting into airports that have very challenging approaches and all that kind of stuff. It was it's really cool to see just like the group of people that, you know, help manage this massive client that's become unbelievably popular over the last couple of years, and just meeting a lot of the, you know, the presidents, vice presidents of different areas and controllers that have been controlling for however many years and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to what VATSIM is and in a whole, like it's you would never think that a service like that is just free to the public for anybody to join and get that kind of experience and that kind of, you know, euphoric understanding of how it could be in the real world. You know, like last Friday, I was flying with Owls while he was streaming, and it was an event out of Miami. And gosh, man, when we were taxiing out to the 8s at Miami, there had to have been 15 planes waiting for departure. You know, we were sitting there, you know, I had debated on shutting down an engine and, you know, saving some fuel and all that kind of stuff. Granted, we were only doing an hour flight, but I was like, holy crap, man, I feel like we have a ground stop right now because Miami was just so busy. But it was awesome to me. I loved that. You know, I don't mind sitting on a taxiway waiting 45 minutes to an hour for my departure, because that's kind of how it can be in real life out of a major international airport. So, you know, it's just awesome to see, especially for the younger youth that are getting into flight simulation and finding their love in aviation with this, because that's just another thing that can boost their what's the word? Could boost their want to pursue this dream, you know. So I think VATSIM is probably one of the best things that flight simulation has to offer right now when it comes to a free client that'll help and educate. It says educate right in their title. So I saw an awesome question for EJ from Dom in chat. Dom, what's going on, my man? It's been a minute. Hope you're doing well. He says, what is it like getting into VATSIM as a controller, and what is your position within VATSIM?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it's going to shift based off of the experience of becoming a controller is going to shift based off of where you try to join. But to give a very brief understanding of VATSIM's organization, you have the Board of Governors. The Board of Governors is about 15 individuals who make up the decisions that affect the entire network. Under the within the Board of Governors, you have 3 representatives for the regions. One is the Vice President of Americas. That's my boss. I'm his assistant. Then you have the Vice President of EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And then you have the Vice President of APAC, which is Asia Pacific, which is Australia all the way over to Singapore, and extending as far as India. I can't remember if Russia's with EMEA or if it's with APAC, but overall, those 3 larger organizations, or those 3 larger positions, really help to lay the ground rules for what we expect out of training, what we expect out of how to move up in positions, and also to an extent pilot conduct. The regional leaders then give direction to the divisional leaders. In addition to being the assistant vice president of the Americas, I am the division director for the Caribbean. So from there, division directors are responsible for maintaining the level of training that is expected out of controllers, regardless of where you are. So for instance, if somebody came to the Caribbean and joined our facility in Jamaica, and they trained on how to be a ground controller, they should be able to leave Jamaica and go anywhere to visit somewhere else. Well, you can't visit as a ground controller anymore, but leave and be a home controller somewhere else, and have enough of the understanding of the principles of how to do air traffic control that the next facility should not have a hard time getting them incorporated. So if they moved from there to go to Philadelphia or to London, yeah, they'd have to catch up on a little bit of procedure, and especially with those being major facilities, there's a little bit more training, but they should understand the procedures well enough from the training they got in Jamaica. So when you try to first join as a controller, the first thing that you'll do is take a standardized test based off of the local code. In the Caribbean, most of our facilities are ICAO based, so you'll get the ICAO Quad 4 book, which is the standards for air traffic controllers. You'll take a generic test that kind of gives an understanding of, do you understand what a clearance is? Do you understand the basics of call signs and all of that fun stuff? And then after you get that basic training, you'll move into individualized training with your facility at the ground level. And then from ground, once you've spent 30 days on the ground facility and you've incorporated 30 hours, you will have considered what's called substantiated your rating. And then you can move into controlling as an S2 tower controller, then S3 approach, then C1 center controller. That's the basic process. In each of those areas, you'll have to spend enough time working the facility and making sure that you're familiar with it. And then an instructor that is appointed by the division will take a look at your progress and determine if you're ready to go on to the next level. The main thing that division directors, the main thing that the regional directors are looking for at these times is we want to make sure that everybody is at a very high level of standard, high caliber to be able to control. Somebody else asked a question I saw in the chat that asked why we're so strict on VATSIM. And the answer to that is not necessarily it's over strict, it's that we are expecting the controllers to be very, very professional, just like you were in the real world. And in some cases, they actually have to do more than in the real world. What Mikey's talking about with the Miami event that I was trying to participate in, but I was like an hour behind them.
Yeah.
Just because there were so many planes on the ground. That's not something that usually happens in real life. 50 planes trying to leave Miami all at one time. So in a situation like that, the controllers technically have to be better than what is required in the real world. London on a daily basis has more planes than they do in real life. It's just astounding how many planes they have. And so VATSIM, with the understanding of all of this, tries to make sure that we have really good standards for those controllers. Now, the problem that we run into is these standards only apply to controllers, and the barrier for pilots is very limited. So what that does create for anybody who's new to the network and you have that hesitancy to join is probably because you tried to join in New York or London and you got told off real quickly.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Because one of the questions that I had, EJ, not to interrupt you, but one of the questions that I had, what are VATSIM's expectations for somebody new coming on? Just, whether they be 12 years old or they be 64, like in my case, what are the expectations of VATSIM for somebody new coming aboard?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's really great when you spend the time to just research a little bit before you make your first connection. Me and I think just about everybody I've spoken to, when we talk about our first connections and how far we came on the network, I remember my first connection. I logged in on the active runway at JFK and started trying to get a mic check. That is the absolute wrong way to have your first connection on VATSIM. The best place to start is at a facility where they're not too busy.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you, if you try to do London, you're going to have a supervisor contact you very quickly afterwards. Because London is not only a facility that where they don't have time to explain things to you, but they expect that when they give you very fast instructions, and funny enough, I don't know why this is the case, but British accents for an American are harder to understand than somebody from Asia speaking English. I don't know why it is, but I have a hard time understanding the British controllers. And if you miss the direction that they tell you to do, like a speed restriction or an altitude restriction, they will let you know. And it does come across as very negative, but the reason is they just don't have time. They don't have the time to sit there and baby or to walk somebody through how to do the procedures. But if you go to a facility like Indiana or Minneapolis, facilities that do get a bit of traffic, even Denver, they get a bit of traffic, but they, unless they have an event, they usually have time to give you a few corrective steps and help you to figure out some of those basic procedures. But the number one thing that I would recommend is don't ever fly a new plane on VATSIM. Make sure you know that plane before you
practice. Yep.
Yeah. And then the other thing is look at when most of us use SimBrief to generate the route. When it generates the route, take a look at that star, that SID, and make sure that you understand both of those. Mm-hmm. Take a look at the controller's ATIS, which will usually tell you what the departure runway is going to be. And if you have Navigraph now, you have the ability to draw on the chart, so you can try to figure out where that taxi line is going to be, or as the controller is giving you the taxi, you can map it on the chart, and that will help you be prepared to make the right turns, to make sure that you understand the airport and you understand what's required of you. Because a lot of times you'll get a controller tell you that after departure, fly the SID. And if you just put your plane on autopilot, sometimes you miss steps. Some of those SIDs have altitude restrictions, some have speed restrictions, and some that are not RNAV procedural will tell you to make a manual turn to a certain altitude right after departure. And if you have the chart in front of you and you can read it, you'll be able to understand those things. Yeah. So to recap, make sure you understand your airplane. Make sure that you understand how to read a SID and star. Make sure you're familiar with the airport ground layout, and then start at a gate.
Yeah.
Do not start on the taxiway or runway. Start at the gate.
Yeah, Talon's Aviation makes a good point there. Volanta has free taxiways. I just discovered that by accident the other day. Because I actually...
Volanta, with their integration now, as you zoom in on a field, now has an airport diagram. Now, is it the best of quality? It's argumentative, but at least when you zoom in, it's got the taxiways and the identifiers of those taxiways right there set in stone for the pilots that are utilizing Volanta. Yeah. And that's another thing that I would add on to the use of VATSIM is understanding your airport and understanding what field you are flying into. Mm-hmm. And I can only attest to what EJ was saying about London Heathrow, because I flew into London Heathrow on stream last week. We were flying Dublin to London Heathrow with Aer Lingus round trip. And when I flew into Heathrow's airspace, there was not a split second of availability. I asked his controller a question. It was every second he was on frequency, giving an airplane an instruction. I have to say, he did a phenomenal job. It blows my mind every time I join a major event. And unbeknownst to me, I had no idea I was flying into an event. That's usually how it goes. You schedule a stream, and then you find out you've got 60 airplanes ahead of you. But when it comes to how I got started in VATSIM. I can only give my experience as to how I did it back then. You know, it could be different for those that are getting into it now. But like EJ said, I would say the three most important things that you have to understand in joining VATSIM is understanding the procedures of the airports that you're flying in and out of, understanding how to read your charts, and understanding the phraseology that the controllers are going to be using. What VATSIM has when filing a flight plan on their website, they have a remarks section. It's a section that I swear up and down by because this is what I used when I first got started. Do not be afraid to put a comment in there. If you are new to VATSIM, stating new pilot to VATSIM, still learning procedures, please be patient. That's what I did. And the tower controller that I had out of Vegas when I was first getting into VATSIM was very understanding of that. He gave me my IFR clearance word by word, very slowly, gave me enough time to write down my notes. That's another thing. Don't forget the use of a pen and pencil, or a pen and a piece of paper. I know we're in 2024 and everybody's got smartphones and laptops and tablets and all that kind of stuff, but have a piece of paper and a notepad and a pen with you right in front of you on your desk. And when you're getting your IFR clearance, just write down what the controller is saying, you know, and learn how to abbreviate those things to your understanding, so you understand how to read that clearance back to that controller. And having ease of access to charts now is a big thing. Big thing that I notice a lot of new pilots on VATSIM do not use, or they're using charts that were published back in 2010, you know, for departures and arrivals that probably don't even exist anymore. So when it comes down to getting started on VATSIM, it's very easy to get overwhelmed, but at the same time, I think that's an expectation that you need to go in understanding and understand that, like, hey, I'm connecting to a worldwide network that people that have been doing this for a lot of years are on right now and have a lot more experience than I do. However, there is not a single VATSIM controller that I know of, with the exception of those that work out of busy airspaces like Boston, New York, LA, etc., that will turn you away if you ask them a question. You know, majority of the controllers are very understanding with the new pilots saying, hey, I think I misread the taxi instructions. Do you mind giving me progressive taxi instructions? And that's something that a tower controller or a ground controller, they might not be the most enthused with that ask, but at the same time, I've never had a controller say no, you know, to those instructions. You just say, hey, I'm unfamiliar with the airspace. Can I request a progressive taxi? And that'll actually, a lot of controllers will actually be a lot happier with that, because you're asking them to help you so you don't screw up their flow, right? And one thing about air traffic controllers, IRL and on VATSIM, Pilot Edge, this, that, the third, if you make their life easier, they're going to make your life easier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, another point that I'll bring up here too, and I bet EJ that you'll agree with that if I can get my mouse to come over here. There we go. You know, listen a lot, guys. Get in there in monitor mode. I forget what's the exact name of that.
Observer.
Observer. Thank you. Get in there in observer mode. Listen to what's going on. Pick a busy airport. Pick a less busy airport. Don't forget too, we're using the CTAF frequencies now going into airports that may or may not have a controller on board at that time. And that's always a good thing. You know, as a ham radio operator, one thing we tell new guys coming in is listen a lot. You know, pay attention to, what's going on, and you'll kind of learn how people are doing things, and you'll be able to get in there and talk. And even to this day, and I've been a radio guy for 40 years, the first time I got on VATSIM, EJ, Mike, I was nervous. You know, had a little bit of nervous energy going on there, and just get in and listen a lot and practice. Listen to guys giving the exchange, and go back and you'll hear the controller say something, and then you practice off mic responding in the same manner as possibly you would, and that's always a good way. Get in there and practice. It's a good thing. Let's see, Mike, did you have any more comments in the chat that you wanted to get to before we continue on here?
Well, I saw a couple, as in like one of the PMDG 777 releasing, but I think that's a question we all would love to have the answer to. But Talon's just asked, are there any plans to advertise CTAF more, because there are still loads of people in the U.S. on 22.8?
Yes. So this is a question that goes down to our supervisor department. I think if we notice it, yeah, we comment on it and we will advise the pilot needs to be on CTAF. When it first came out, VATSIM had a broadcast message just about every day for it. And honestly, I forget all the time because I do a lot of European flying. Then I come back to the US and I'm like, why is nobody on Unicom? Ah, that's right. We're not using that anymore. So it is a thing where people always need the reminder. I think what we're going to be waiting for is the conclusion of this test and to see if the Board of Governors decides, hey, we're going to do CTAF continually now. And if that's the case, I'd imagine we'll start to see more and more of a push to make sure that people understand that. My own opinion on that, I don't necessarily know if it's best. The CTAF has the way of making problems disappear. Like for instance, when I go to London, I just flew into London this morning, landed at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was getting, landing into Heathrow. I had stuff from Stansted, Heathrow, and Gatwick all on the Unicom frequency, so it was really hard to determine who's moving and get space to tell people that I was landing. But with CTAF, it corrects that problem, but it creates the problem of making sure that people switch frequencies, and that might be a little bit more difficult to get everybody in the habit of doing. So I think the short answer here is we're going to wait to see what the Board of Governors decide. If we keep CTAF, I'm sure you'll see a lot more reminders and enforcement of being on CTAF.
I got to tell you, I like it. I really actually like it. I feel like maybe it's a little more real world, just in my own realm there. But EJ, a specific question, and actually, Mike, I'd been meaning to ask you this for some time before we met EJ here through Discord. But EJ, what is the proper distance from the airport to start using the CTAF frequency, and when should you start using Unicom and not use Unicom for those who might want to know that? And I'd like to ask that in particular.
Yeah, generally, anytime you're going to be starting the approach procedures, as you're concluding your initial descent, and you're into what on a visual chart would look like you're entering the airport's bubble. And so I would say anytime you're descending below 18,000, flight level 180, excuse me, you'll start to want to move over to that frequency because there's really nothing that you need to communicate with other pilots on the network once you're below flight level 180 on Unicom. From that point on, you're entering the approach procedures. You should go ahead and switch to CTAF.
Oh, very good, very good. All right, that's good there. Mike, do we have any other questions that you want to address at the moment in chat?
Not that I can see as of right now. I saw that Isaac Johnson, who is a IRL a pilot, I believe he just finished up his commercial, if I'm not mistaken. He is saying 5 minutes from the airport to switch to CTAF. And I've seen a plethora of different things that people have said of when you should switch to CTAF. I've said when I initially started using CTAF, it was what EJ was explaining is below 18,000 feet. I was switching onto the CTAF frequency as that would be the beginning of my approach procedures. That's how I kind of see it as a virtual pilot, is like once I hit transition altitude, my approach has started.
Yeah.
So, you have that option. I've had some people say below 10,000. I've had some people say on a 5 to 10 nautical mile final because it's a tower frequency you're switching to. If those that don't know what CTAF is, for VATSIM specifically, when you're advised to switch to a CTAF frequency, they want you switching to the airport's facility tower frequency. So like, for example, if I'm flying into Vegas, their CTAF frequency is going to be 19.1. So I know that immediately if I'm flying into Vegas, I need to have 19.1 pre-programmed in my radio stack. So when I turn on that final or whatever, I can switch over to their tower frequency. So some people still treat it as if it's a tower frequency because of those that have ever been in a fully staffed airport going from center to approach to tower to ground on an arrival, you always get that instruction from your approach controller to say turn left heading 290 to intercept the 26 left localizer, contact tower 5 from this waypoint at this frequency, right? So I know some people that use CTAF as if it still is tower frequency, and when they're getting close on their final, they'll switch to that CTAF and start making their Unicom call outs on that frequency within the 15 nautical mile radius of the airport. But I, to be honest with you, I saw a lot of negative things about CTAF when it first became a thing with VATSIM. But I had mentioned this on stream to a lot of my viewers when CTAF first became a thing with VATSIM US. And I said to my viewers, I was like, there's really no reason for you guys to dislike this. It's the reason people are disliking this is because people don't like change in the flight sim community, right? When you see something new that is going to change the way you fly your airplane, the way you've been flying for however many years, you can get frustrated at that point. But at the same time, this tool is built to help you because there's been such a vast saturation of pilots on the Unicom frequency that it's been becoming more increasingly difficult to make your call outs. So like, for example, if I'm flying in LA airspace, right, and I'm descending into Vegas, right? Vegas, although is a major airport in the US, it's not very popular on VATSIM, if you would. There's not too much traffic, and it's I would put it up there with Minneapolis or Detroit or something like that, because although they're major airports, they don't see a lot of traffic unless there's an event. But when you're trying to make calls into Vegas and you're getting Unicom calls from aircrafts in LA, when LA is one of the more popular airports on VATSIM, it became difficult to do so, right? So I saw the reason for CTAF becoming a thing as a reasonable change, because it'll help those that are just flying into a smaller airport make their calls for those that are going to be at that airport. So, if it becomes a required thing now, because I know it's still under trial with the US, if it becomes a required thing, it's at that point, it's on the pilot. If they're flying on a network, where they know they're going to be connecting to a client that's going to have hundreds of other users on it, it's going to be up to them to follow the policies and procedures that are expected of them. It just because it's a free service doesn't mean that you can just join and operate how you feel you should be operating. You have to follow the procedures, just like flying for a virtual airline, right? I'm a hub manager with a virtual airline with LA, or with LAX, with American Virtual. American Virtual is also partnered with VATSIM. So, understanding that when I put AmericanVA.net in my pilot remarks and I'm promoting that virtual airline, I now have 6 different sets of eyes who are going to look at this report and saying, okay, he was flying on VATSIM. Was he following their code of conduct during the flight as well? So it's at that point, you just have to be susceptible to the change. And if you don't want to be susceptible to change, that's the beautiful thing about being online, is you can just hit the uninstall button and fly freely. That's my opinion personally, because I've seen everything from people connecting to the VATSIM client just to troll a live streamer, to those who are just actually joining to learn this, that, the third. And when it came down to understanding how VATSIM operates, I think that's where a lot of people fail, is understanding the procedures that they have to follow in order to be within VATSIM's code of conduct during their flight. So I don't see CTAF as a negative change at all. I think it's going to help a lot when it comes to the major airspaces within the US, like Boston, New York, LA, Phoenix, Dallas, so on and so forth. The airspaces that see a lot of traffic. Because if you have an airspace full of 100 airplanes and 30% of those airplanes are flying, let me rephrase that. You have an airspace full of 100 airplanes and 50% of those airplanes are flying into Dallas, Fort Worth. When you have the other 10% going into Love Field, the other 15% going into Hobby, the other however many good percent going into San Antonio and Austin and this, that, the third. You have all of those airplanes now swapping to one frequency that you're not going to hear their calls on. So you can now focus on your flight into an airport that may not be as busy as that major international hub. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's a really good change. It's going to take some getting used to. I think that's why I'm still hesitant to it right now. And then the other thing, without going into too much detail, it's just really hard to police on the supervisor side of things. Whereas if somebody doesn't, because it's part of the code of conduct that you should be on CTAF or a part of Unicom, it's very easy to police if you're on, to see if you're on Unicom from a supervisor's perspective. The CTAF add some complications to that we need to get fixed, and it's creating problems where people are frustrated because they're landing and they're making calls on CTAF, and other people are landing and they're making calls on Unicom. Mm-hmm. It's harder for me as a supervisor to be able to determine that, though. So there's some internal stuff that has left me with some bad taste in my mouth, but it's all stuff that is fixable. And then, like I said, with my example of going into London, we'll fix that. Like you said, you have 50% of planes going to Dallas, and then the other planes that are dispersed onto different frequencies. It is much better that way. It's just going to take some getting used to.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And I could see at some point VATSIM introducing something as a slight reminder for those that are going to be operating. If the change, let's say, for example, the U.S. trial shows a huge percentage of positivity, and the Board of Governors make it a requirement now within the VATSIM's code of conduct. I could see them doing something as in sending a ping to the pilot, an automated ping that will give you a reminder saying, hey, you're so-and-so nautical miles from the airfield, because we all know the V-pilot ping in our ears. We all know it, right? We know what it sounds like. We're either receiving a private message from another pilot, a private message from a supervisor or a air traffic controller, or you're receiving an automated message like your PDC or your ACAR's squawk code, because there's no, and I love that they do that now. I loved when they made that change where you automatically receive a squawk code, even if there's no air traffic controller online to provide you with one. So that way, when you do fly into an airspace that's online, they already have you on their, they just tell you to ident, right? So I could see them doing something like that, like, hey, you're so-and-so nautical miles from your airfield, please make sure you're switching to the CTAF frequency at this time during your flight, or whatever, however it may. I could see them doing something like that. But I do agree that it's hard for supervisors to police it, because it's not something that it's like, okay, how do you find a pilot at fault for not swapping to a frequency as in CTAF when they're operating on a Unicom frequency, which is Universal Communications, Unicom stands for, right? So I can understand that. I did see an awesome question in chat that has gotten me thinking about it. I've never thought about this before, stating, if drivable ground vehicles were introduced, this is from Kills My Skills, if drivable ground vehicles were introduced, do you think VATSIM would open up a role to be ground crew, as in a airport ground crew, like ramp controllers, et cetera, et cetera?
That's an interesting question. For those of you who have used FSX or even FS 2004, there was a plugin that was built to do this type of thing. So the fact that 2024 seems to have that type of capability is not necessarily new to Flight Sim. And VATSIM has made a pretty clear statement on how they feel about this. They actually attach it to the Code of Conduct. It's Code of Conduct A13, which pretty much says that the only types of connections that will be allowed are observers, pilots, and air traffic controllers. And that means there will be no ground vehicles, whether that's pushback trucks, whether that is individuals acting as ground crew. That is not something that VATSIM is looking to entertain. And a lot of this has to go down to those operating costs of doing this as well. It's one thing that stuff would have to be monitored as well, but already right now the cost of running VATSIM is rather substantial. It's more than most people probably realize, and I'm thankful they've opened up donations that at least offset some of that cost. But to have enough of server ping and back and forth to have people on the ground in a way that shows them in somewhat real time, I think would be far too taxing on the server as is.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying no. I'm not saying it'll never happen, because VATSIM has surprised me before by allowing things that were previously not allowed. But I would not think it's likely that they will do that.
And
gosh, could you imagine? Yeah. Could you imagine being in the cockpit and you go and you hear ground to cockpit, and it's like you actually have a person that's operating the tug and all that kind of stuff? That immersion would be amazing. But I could see, where that lies when it comes to the cost of operating that, and now having to hire supervisors to um coordinate and supervise those operations and training those that need to be trained on it, the kind of stuff. Like, it'd be cool, don't get me wrong, it'd be really cool having a real person pushing back your airplane from the gate versus GSX. But you know, I can understand that.
I got a
Never
question.
say never.
Yeah, I got a question regarding that. First of all, EJ, everybody with VATSIM basically is volunteer. I mean, this is not something that somebody's getting paid for. First of all, is that absolutely correct?
Yes and no. Nobody in VATSIM draws a check. Matter of fact, to this day, the founders, not the board of governors, the founders, which is a completely different group, the people who actually created VATSIM, for the most part, are still the ones paying for VATSIM. There are some small, infrequently approved flight schools that are allowed to work with VATSIM. VATSIM does draw a amount off of that. I don't know how much of it is public, but generally, what they're getting paid is not covering a day of server costs.
Yeah.
And because VATSIM is a nonprofit, a registered nonprofit, nobody can make a profit anyway. So any money that is generated by doing that goes straight back into the costs of VATSIM.
Well, it's very important then, by and large, that the flight sim community really do try to support VATSIM in some way, a donation, some way of maybe trying to help out. I've got another question kind of along those lines, but I keep hearing you mention VATSIM servers. Where are the servers located? Is there a central hub? Are there in guys' houses, all over the world? Do you know exactly, or can say without having to shoot me, kind of how that part of it works?
Well, you used to, if you recall, when you tried to sign on to vPilot, or for those of you who are controllers, you used to be able to select the server. One of the reasons that went away is because the servers have more or less become centralized. And they are, I don't know the central locations. I know that there's some based in the United States, some that are in Germany, and some that are in Singapore. And I believe those are now the three most populous ones. Australia, because of laws and regulations in Australia, they have their own server that if you're Australian, you pretty much connect to that one because that's government procedure. But that automated system now is just, aside from Australian connections, is looking at who is closest to the server, which server is the least loaded down, and it's just automatically selecting where you go. That prevents the problem that we were running into of everybody being like, well, I'm on the U.S. East Coast, and here's the U.S. East Coast server. So when the U.S. East Coast was at its peak, people would start getting just dropped from the network because the bandwidth was just completely gone. VATSIM has added some new servers, and they are looking at removing some shared servers and going completely dedicated. So for those of you who know the cost of dedicated servers, and when VATSIM has at least 6 of them, yeah, the cost per month is pretty high for VATSIM.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine that VATSIM is going to be represented at Flight Sim Expo coming up. You have a booth there, and guys can stop by maybe and say hello and learn a little bit more. Is that going to be the case?
That's a great question. I was looking at the booth layout, and I didn't see one by VATSIM, and I failed to ask our marketing department. If they don't have one, I'm assuming they sponsor a breakout session. I do know that most of VATSIM's leadership plans on being there. I'm still iffy. I bought a ticket. I just don't know if I'm actually going to go.
Well, Mike will pick you up at the airport.
Yeah.
It's other travel plans that are getting in the way. We'll see how that works out. But I do know that the vice president of the Americas will be there, Tim Barber, who is the VACGov1, the president of VATSIM, is also planning to be there. So we'll definitely have a lot of representation. I just didn't see a booth on the layout.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hey, very good. Well, man, I tell you, we probably could go on and on about VATSIM, and we certainly can. Mike, I'm not seeing any new questions there in the chat. Maybe give you guys a chance here to take a little break if you need to for just a moment. I'm going to pop up CST Gaming. I'm going to put him up here on the live stream just real quick, and let me get his audio turned up here and see if he'll
still to the east.
say hello to us. He's got a stream going on right now, and I said, CST, get in here and give us a cameo appearance. So let's see if he'll say hello to us here.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
Oh, he's starting engines up now. He may be too busy at the moment. Anyway, guys, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today here on the Captain Jack channel. I want to thank MickityyyMike and EJ for being along. We're going to go on. We've got some other topics to cover and discuss here. We'll see if CJ or CST notices in the chat there to say hello to us, but it looks like he's getting ready to fly out. Let's see. He's doing Air New Zealand.
Jack, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, there he is.
I am live. What's going on, fellas?
Oh, well, there we go. We got the little shout out from.
Things looking good. Absolutely, man. Love it. Thought of joining you in the event, but sadly, I live in Canada. Oceania events are hard to come by. Absolutely, man. Yeah.
Sorry about that. That's Loads Station speaking. Contacting tower. Goodbye. Thank you for the ATC times.
I'm gonna go one engine taxi for right now, fellas.
Okay, we'll say thanks for the cameo there from CST Gaming. And sounds like they're busy there.
No radio etiquette whatsoever, bro.
Okay, no radio etiquette, he's saying. All right, we'll go ahead and come back to the group here. Wait a minute, let me get rid of this. You know, that's the thing I hate about YouTube. They just pop commercials up at any time. Guys, if you haven't had a chance to hit that like button yet, sure would appreciate that here on the channel. Let's get back in here. Mike, EJ, do you have any more that you want to say about VATSIM or anything to do with that before we pick up Flight Sim Expo? Mike, go ahead.
Again, guys, if you're looking into getting to VATSIM, you have to understand this is called virtual air traffic simulation is what VATSIM stands for, those that do not know. So you're getting into a network that is taken as seriously maybe even more so as those who are just flying regular flight sim on a regular basis. I will tell you that it does add a lot of realism to your flight simulation experience, being able to have a controller controlling you and giving you instructions and all that kind of stuff. So if it's something that you are looking into getting into, there are thousands of resources online available to you to get started, like how-tos and what to do when receiving clearances, and how to speak with your controllers and understanding the definitions of some phraseology that you may not understand. So I would definitely do your research and take your time to understand procedures and policies in the code of conduct before you make your first connection. Or if you do want to make your first connection before doing that while you're studying, connect as an observer, like we were explaining, at a major airport and just listen. You know, that's a huge tool that a lot of people underutilize with VATSIM is the observer mode. So if you log into a major airspace like Boston, New York, LA, so on and so forth, or even London out in European airspace, all that kind of stuff, you just connect as an observer and sit there with a pen and paper and just write down what you're hearing. And if it's something that you don't understand, highlight it and put a question mark next to it. Maybe a controller will explain it to you if they have enough time to do so. But please, if you do fly on VATSIM, please make sure you understand the equipment that you're flying. Make sure you understand the procedures that you're flying and what you're filing with your controller. Because I can promise you, their ATC controllers hate nothing more than pilot deviation. So make sure that you're understanding those things and be confident. confidence is a huge thing on VATSIM. If you're confident about what you're doing, the controller will see that you have a little bit of an understanding of how and what you're doing. So that way, if you do make a mistake, it doesn't look as bad, right? So, and don't be afraid to make a mistake. A simple apology to a controller. If you make a mistake, if they tell you to go left heading 230 and you start making a right-hand turn and they call you out on it, apologies, we're correcting our course now. Something simple like that. They're not looking for an explanation. They're not looking for excuses. They're not looking for anything. So just get back to doing what they said. Because you'll be astounded how one airplane can mess up the flow of an entire airport, especially during an event and all that kind of stuff. So I think VATSIM is an awesome tool, especially those that are looking into getting into aviation for a real world job and pursuing that career. Just a short story for myself. When I first got into flight school, when I was, thank you, hun. Just got my energy drink from Dutch Bros. Okay. When I first got into flight school, when I was starting to get my PPL out in Westchester County, Pennsylvania, my flight instructor, Tom Birch, I remember, he's a fantastic guy, looked at me and he's like, so do you have any experience whatsoever with aviation or air traffic controlling or whatever it might be? I was like, well, I fly on VATSIM and I use flight simming. I fly on flight simulation, 1,000 hours a year, at least minimum. And he looked at me and said, okay, take everything you've learned from that and throw it out the window. This is real world now. We're not in nothing. None of that is going to pertain to here. And I was like, okay, well, if that's how it's going to be, that's all good. So we walked out to the airplane, we did our walk around, we did all that kind of stuff, got in, got the engine started. We started getting ready to release the brakes and taxi out to the runway. And I asked my flight instructor if I could handle radio calls because my flight school was at an uncontrolled airspace or uncontrolled airport. So, you had to make Unicom callouts at this airport, IRL. So I remember to this day, it was the Geo Carlson Airport, Kilo Mike Quebec Sierra was my identifier. And that's where I did my studying. And I remember taxiing out and I said, Chester County traffic, Skyhawk November 21056, going to be taxiing runway 29 via Alpha. My instructor looks at me and he goes, how did you know that? I was like, I fly on VATSIM, and I fly with ATC when I can. And when we have no ATC online, we make Unicom calls. So traffic patterns and taxiing instructions and all that kind of stuff is stuff that I'm used to saying over the frequency, because if I'm taxiing at an airport with a lot of airplanes there and there's no controller online to control us, you have to make those calls. And he looked at me, he goes, never heard of this thing before. I'm going to go home and take a look at it. And he went home and took a look at it. And he's like, wow, that's actually a really cool freaking tool that flights. I had no idea that flight simulation did that. I was like, yeah, these are some real world air traffic controllers that log on voluntarily just to provide us with some service to make it a little bit more realistic. So it is a tool that can help you in your training, 100%. So
absolutely, yeah.
Make sure you understand the code of conduct and you're following the rules and policies and you'll be just fine.
Oh, that is so awesome. Yeah, great story there, Mike. And, it's just more encouraging here for those of us who are learning. I did make a mistake the other night. I practiced for about a week and a half in the Phoenix A320 before I got on VATSIM, but I made the mistake of doing the stream and getting on VATSIM for the first time with the A320. Yeah, and it was like that, and I was a little lost, and then our buddy on YouTube here, Yoham, helped me get through some of the stuff on the MicDo there, the FMC version for the A320. And could not figure out how to get to a SID point that the controller was asking me to get to. So you can go back and watch the replay on that one, and you can see where I kind of struggled with it. But, familiarization with your equipment and understanding what it is that the controllers are trying to tell you is so important. Mike, you'll notice a question there from Talon's Aviation. What are the rules, for example, on disconnecting for a bit across the Atlantic on a longer overhaul there, then connecting back? Can he do so? Let's see, BCU can't connect in midair. What do you guys think about that question?
That is allowed. I guess what he's referring to is the VATSIM Code of Conduct B1, which says that you're not supposed to connect on an active taxiway or runway. And what it says about connecting in midair is that if you connect in midair, you need to make sure that you're not going to be a conflict. Mm-hmm. The way that this has been loosely interpreted is if you connect in a controlled airspace when an event is going on, you're going to get kicked off. if you connect in the middle of the flight service center that runs between Gander and Shanwick, and nobody's around, the controller will panic for a second as they try to figure out where exactly you are as you start to make a connection attempts, but that's fine. It's just that you need to make sure that you're not interrupting the flow. Like, for instance, if you connect on final approach to JFK and you're going the wrong way, or you enter the flow of other planes, then that's not allowed. But if you just enter at cruise level in most places, you'll be fine reconnecting to the network.
Yeah, it seems I watch VATSPY, of course, to kind of see not only where I am in the map, but if a controller is on, or in Volanta, of course, it shows that in the map. So in theory, then, if I'm on a longer flight and nobody's controlling that area, but I need to disconnect for whatever reason, that's okay. Reconnect in there. Make sure you're still squawking the same thing that you were originally assigned, and that kind of thing is kind of okay anyway if you absolutely have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's preferred that you disconnect anyways if you need to step away, because the next part of the code of conduct, B2, says that you can only pause when in controlled airspace, which is a weird wording, but essentially means that you need to be able to ask the controller if it's okay to pause. If you pause in an airspace where nobody is, it's against the code of conduct, because a controller can sign in, or you could be in a place that is inoptimal for other planes crossing the area. So just go ahead and disconnect. I mean, nobody will get mad at you for reconnecting unless you happen to reconnect on approach or something. In that case, I would just do it offline.
Yeah, just use just use common sense. Mike, I noticed that you and Scott were having an exchange there in the chat.
Yeah, Scott Hines in chat. Welcome. Hope you're doing well, man. From what I read, he's a real world pilot, and based off of his profile picture, I'm assuming he's commercial and all that kind of stuff. He was saying that I know why your flight instructor told you that new student pilots need to come up with no expectation. Just makes it easier initially to present new information, at least from a CFI standpoint. And that makes total sense. I couldn't agree with that more. And I understand now, looking back at it at now age 28 versus when I was 18, first getting into flight school, I can see why he said that to me, because at the time I didn't understand it. I was like, well, it's flight simulation. It's supposed to be simulated in real world. What are you talking about? But at the same time, looking at that now as an adult, it's like, it's you're getting into a real world airplane where accidents can happen, right? This isn't just something where if an accident happens on a sim that you can just hit the escape button, restart, right? So understanding going in with no expectations is a massive thing that I agree with 100%. I just tell that story because there is a use for these things that are available to us now as flight simmers, right? And Scott actually said he said he's not at all saying that VATSIM and simulation levels that are available today are not unavailable. Unvaluable they are. And I do agree with that 100%. And when you speak to real world pilots, especially those who are certified flight instructors, I can agree where going into flight school with zero expectations, regardless of the experience you have on flight simming, is something that you have to understand. He also said that many professional flight schools do use services like Pilot Edge. And if you guys are unfamiliar with what Pilot Edge is, that's a whole nother topic of conversation that we can discuss at some point if you wish to. But it's VATSIM on steroids, if you would. It's a paid service where those controllers are getting paid by the hour to control. It's top-down coverage. I think they cover all the way from the West Coast U.S. down, I think, to the far east coast of Colorado is as far as their services go. So go ahead, EJ.
Yeah, I was going to say Pilot Edge is the model for what's happening right now in VATSIM on a very limited level. Flight schools are using VATSIM now to train. It doesn't happen in the United States right now because VATSIM has a very, very defined look at places. They don't want too much traffic from these flight schools when the area is already populated. But areas like Asia, the Philippines, there are flight schools there that are using it. So this is how close we're getting to VATSIM being related to what's actually happening in the real world aviation community, that we have true to life flight schools that are working with us to do these types of events and to train their pilots.
Very good, guys. Man, great discussion. Great stuff there. I want to take just another moment, if I may, here. And I want to tell you guys about some other people here on YouTube that I follow in particular, and that really provide some really great stuff as far as not only content, but the pilot, the flying community, everything, and that is one of them, of course, is Fly with Kay. Kay has a wonderful flight stream channel that is real life. She owns and operates that new airplane there. Just came up from a little, I want to say it was well, I forget. It was a smaller aircraft. Now I'm forgetting. It's off the top of my head. But I've been watching her, and she is really, really so good at teaching real world procedures. The way she does her checklists as she flies, have really been really impressed with that. And Fly with Kay does such a great job, so I'd encourage you to check out her channel. Also, A330 driver. Now, Mike, I know you're familiar with this guy as well, and I have been seeing some really great stuff from him on not only procedures, how to fly these aircraft, but I noticed this today, Freeware Frankfurt. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the software and things that are available to us as flight simmers. And another one in that line is the Bing Map Enhancement. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about this yet. Mike, I've been experimenting with this for about a week. My friend Scott here in the chat, who's also, like you said, a real-world pilot and a flight simmer, kind of turned me on to this. Are you familiar with the Bing Map Enhancement yet? Have you done anything with that?
I am familiar with it. However, I have not attempted to try it yet, as I haven't loaded the sim in over a week.
Oh, right.
So,
right.
But I have seen the Bing Map Enhancement. I think it's an awesome tool that just kind of enhances the already beautiful visual aesthetics that Microsoft has. It just enhances it even more so to be a little bit more true to real life when it comes to the colors on the ground and all that kind of stuff. It's a freeware product that's available for everybody to use, and it looks like the installation is relatively simple from what I understand, as long as you can understand dragging and dropping files and understanding where to place them and all that kind of stuff.
You know, they've actually made it a lot simpler than that. You don't even need to do that now.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah, it's super easy. Watch this guy's video on the screen there that we had up. Let me bring that back because I changed it to something else. And it's simply called Bing Map Enhancement Mod for MSFS 2020. And I'm real impressed with it. I've been using it in every location from Denver to Southern California and everything. It doesn't really hurt the frame rates at all. I've really been impressed with that. And guys, I really encourage you to do it. As a matter of fact, to be honest with you, Mike, it made Denver look a lot more real, a lot more realistic as far as I know what this city looks like in and out, just like you would Vegas. And
right.
I'm impressed. I am really impressed with it. Once again, it doesn't seem to hurt any of the operations of your flight simulator. So I would encourage you to look into that. Last but not least here, at just the moment, we may be having a special guest in here with myself and Owls and EJ and Mike and CST when he can join us. But Captain Canada has actually given us a preliminary okay to try to have him as a special guest speaker on with us here this summer. So watch out for that. We'll have an announcement here on the channel pretty soon, but I would really enjoy that. I have to admit that he is the first flight streamer that I actually found here on YouTube, and of course, he's certainly very high up there. Mike, I got to tell you, I spent, like I said, nearly the entire summer last year watching you and Captain Canada and Owls. So,
oh yeah, Captain Canada. As much as there are people that dislike him, there are even more that like him as a flight simulation live streamer. And me personally, I think Captain Canada really sets the bar when it comes to the expectation of the development when it comes to flight simming, all that kind of stuff. He's very, very true and honest. And that's why, there are a lot of, like I said, people aren't susceptible to change in our day and age, but they're also not susceptible to honesty, right? And when it comes down to it, I have more respect for an individual, as much as it may hurt my feelings, if they're honest with me about something I've made that might be not that good, right? So like, let's say for example, I decided to, just drop everything and develop an A330 for Microsoft, and it comes out and it's FS98 quality. I expect to be told that, so I know how to make those changes. And Captain Canada, in my opinion, sets the precedent for those of understanding, because he's sponsored by many people, right? He's sponsored by Thrustmaster. He's a Thrustmaster ambassador, Orbix partner, so on and so. He's got plethora of people that back his channel. But at the same time, regardless of who they are, if they come out with a product that's not good, he's the first thing to say, hey, this is not good. There are things that need to change here. And I respect that about him 100%. They might not agree with him, stretching, quote unquote, on stream or whatever it might be, but who cares, at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Captain Canada was actually one of the first flight sim streamers that I found on YouTube as well. I've been watching him for almost 6 years now. And I've been a concurrent member on his channel for, I think, what the last membership milestone I said to him was 66 months.
Wow.
So I'm very much so looking forward to meeting him at the expo, because I've been in his chat for many years. And I would love to sit down and have a conversation with him. We could probably talk for hours about flight simming and everything in between, So another couple of channels that I could recommend for real world pilots that record and post onto YouTube. I think everyone knows who this is. Citation Max is one of my favorite YouTubers out there. He's also a VATSIM controller. He does controller in the Boston airspace and the New York airspace. So definitely check him out. Citation Max, Stevo One Canevo, Premier One Driver. Those are just some people that I can off the top of my head.
Yeah, Steve Canevo is another one that I really enjoy personally.
Yeah. So what do you think about the upcoming expo, EJ? What are your expectations? What are you expecting to see here, development wise? What are your expectations from this year's expo?
Yeah, I think it might be a good thing if I don't go, because I'm just going to go and harass the developers.
Spend money.
I think I want to ask a lot of the questions that everybody's been asking for forever. When are you releasing planes? Or if you're not releasing planes, why do you keep giving us dates that you can't hold?
Right.
I think right now PFDG is the one that's like the biggest offender of that. But I was just laughing with a buddy about Aerosoft. From the beginning of MSFS 2020, they've been talking about this A330, and they got to the point where they're like, yeah, we're going to wait till 2024 comes out. And now 2024 got delayed all the way till November. I'm doubting that Aerosoft will have that 330 released in 2024. I imagine that we're going to be looking at 2025. And at that point, I don't even know if it's worth it, because looking at the previews, it looks like INI's got one already set up for 2024.
Yeah. I agree. And I think we touched on this on the last time we had this podcast, was the extent of expectation from a development team, and things being overpromised and underdelivered, right? I saw Scott said, just going back to the Bing enhancement mod real quick. Scott says no performance hit and all on my system with the Bing map enhancement mod. Increases the level of detail tremendously, even at distance, without performance loss. So I'm definitely now going to have to check that out. If it's extending level of detail at distance, that's one thing that I have been trying to find how to edit within the Microsoft settings. And by the way, Jack, I believe you are currently live streaming YouTube Studio. I don't know if you want to get back over to Discord.
Oh yeah, no, thanks, man. Yeah. Let's go back over to there. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Scott also says, great live stream, guys. You're all discussing very interesting topics related to flight sim. We appreciate that, Scott. Thank you so much. But again, when it comes to this, is going to be my first year going to the expo. I wanted to go to the one in Orlando a couple of years ago, but financially, I just couldn't make it happen. But I couldn't agree more that there are a lot of people that have laid down on the sword for these developers and haven't gotten anything back, And like EJ said with PMDG and the 777, it's like I understand what PMDG is trying to do. I don't want to sit here and slander them because they're a very very good development team. They've been around for years, but at the same time, it's like I understand you're trying to release an airplane with zero problems, but at the same time, someone is going to find a bug. It doesn't matter how you can throw one bug into that airplane that's like a needle in a haystack, but there is one guy in the basement of his house that spends 10 to 15 hours on his flight sim a day that is going to find an issue with that airplane. Like, it's bound to happen. So, I get they want to release their most complete product ever to be released, is what they're advertising it to be. But at the same time, it's like, why? If the airplane is functional and I can get from A to B without any major issues, then I would say just release the airplane. Release the airplane and just do bug fix updates. That's all you have to do. If there are minor bugs that aren't gonna, jeopardize the use of the airplane from a customer standpoint, then there should be no issue with just releasing the airplane to the public and then just doing, bi-weekly bug fix updates and all that kind of stuff just to get the airplane to where it needs to be at a 100% completed state. But in my opinion, I don't think any technologically developed thing for a flight simulator, not even outside of flight simulator, you can go to motorsport racing, you can go to any games that you can modify with a third-party client. There's going to be issues regardless. Someone's going to find something wrong with it. And nothing's going to be perfect. So, I think my expectation at the expo is to get answers and understand why things have happened the way they have. Because if I'm not mistaken, PMDG stated they're not going to be at the expo, but they're going to be doing a virtual seminar. They're going to be doing some announcements and stuff like that. And if I'm not mistaken, PMDG also stated that they're going to be announcing a secret project that they've been working on. It's apparently supposed to be an airplane they have never developed before. It's a brand new product to their lineup. Because I know they only have the three major, which are the 7.3, the 7.4, and the 777. Obviously, you have the DC-6 and all that kind of stuff, but it's supposed to be a product that they have never released before, or they've never worked on before. It's not anything that's been in their lineup, and I'm hoping that I don't walk into that virtual seminar and just hear everything about the new airplane. I don't care about the new airplane right now. That's a project that's coming down the line. It's cool, 100%. You got my support. What's going on with the 777? That's going to be everyone's question, right? So, CJ's in the house. What's going on, CJ? Yeah, how are you guys? We're all doing well, CJ. Appreciate you stopping in. Scott also says, sorry guys, give me just 1 second. I'll be right back. EJ, I don't know if you want to comment on the PMDG.
Yeah, sure. And Jack, I think that's one of the main things there. It's not that PMDG has a bad product. It's not that when it comes out, we're not all going to be thrilled to death to have it. PMDG just puts themselves in a position where they set up their customers to be very upset at them. Because PMDG's main reason why they delay is because they want to release that perfect plane. But as Mike said, all it takes is one person to find that bug, and then all of a sudden you're getting a patch update 2 days after the game was the plane was released, and that just upsets everybody because it's not the fact that they have a patch, but the fact that they had a patch when they delayed it for over a year to make sure that they didn't have to have a patch. When the plane comes out, it's great. It's just the failure of meeting the expectations that they set. And so I didn't know about the secret plane project, but I'm already I got a bad feeling in my stomach because
yeah.
If they do that, they're going to set up expectations. I don't care what plane it is. It could be the A350. Whatever it is, I can see them saying, here it is, and we'll have it by the end of 2025. And then we're going to get back into the same thing that we're going through with the 777. Why did you tell us if you're nowhere near development finish? Or even a data release?
Yeah, I agree. And Scott also said something very, very understanding in this for the software development side. It said it's software development. You just have to get it close enough because there's always going to be some issues. Otherwise, you will never release the product. And I couldn't agree with that more. Because, I've caught a lot of flack from this on my streams, but, there is a development team that 100% has my backing, 100%, and that's Phoenix. Because although Phoenix has been quiet, when they update, they are straightforward to the point and honest about why they've been quiet. So, like, for example, we were promised IEEs 319 and 321 by end of calendar year 2023, right? But obviously that did not happen. We didn't get the IEEs until March of this year, right? So, they caught a lot of flack because of that, right? It's like setting up again expectations that have not been met and people getting a bad taste in their mouth for their team. But at the same time, when it comes to Phoenix, the head of Phoenix over there, I believe his name is Amir, if I'm not mistaken. He's a very intelligent person. Every time he posts something about the airplane, it's one of the most detailed theses that you could read about anything. I feel like I'm reading a college essay when I'm reading his updates. But he states very clear cut and to the point why things have been quiet and why promises have not been met. And that's respectable. It's like, should you have been updating your customers over time? Yeah. Do I agree with the whole being quiet thing because you guys are hard at work? It takes one person to hop on Discord and at everyone and say, hey, this is what's going on right now. And click enter and send the message so people at least have an understanding of what's going on. And I say this all the time. If I were a software development team, my customers would get a weekly update or a bi-weekly update, even if I don't have anything to update them on. I just say, hey, everyone, we're still hard at work at this. Like I said a couple weeks ago, we're still working on this. This is what we've gotten done. This is what we're still working on. And I think that's where the flight simulation community has lost a lot of trust with these development teams. Like, because we've 2020, Microsoft 2020 has been out 4 years now. We are 5 months away from a new installment, right? And we are still rocking 2 airplanes. 737 and A320, right? That's the most common airplane that's on on the flight simming network, on the VATSIM network. I mean, that's all I ever see is 737s and A320s, with the exception of some 75s and 76s over from the X-plane side. But we're 4 years into this sim, and now, granted, it's a new simulator. I know they had issues with their SDK. I know they had issues with developers being able to port their stuff over at the beginning, but all that, from what I understand, has been done. So it's like, why are we having so many issues here? Aerosoft has an A320 family. They have a 318, 319, 20, and 21 that I used in FSX religiously. Why hasn't that been ported over? You have the FS Labs. Why hasn't that been ported over? You have Quality Wing 787, which was one of the most popular airplanes ever to be produced, right next to the 777 and the 74 by PMDG. And then Quality Wing saying, hey, we've been in business a long time. Thousands of the copies of this airplane have been sold. However, we don't have the money to port it over to Microsoft 2020. It's like, how in the hell does that happen? Right? So when it comes down to the facts of these development teams, I think there's just a lot of trust that needs to be regained. I'm not saying it can't be ever, right? I'm a firm believer that once trust is broken, you have an opportunity to rebuild that bridge. Just make sure you build it on a strong foundation. And I think that's what development teams need to do. We're 5 months away from Microsoft 2024, and we still all have these red question marks above our heads about, what's the future going to look like? We have so many airplanes that we've been promised, like the A380 from Fly-by-Wire, the A220 from Synaptic Simulations. Bluebird, I can understand why they did not release this year, because they did say that they now have backing from people that they're going to make it a very the most high fidelity 757 that's ever been released for a simulator. So I'm very excited for that. And they've been posting updates on their YouTube channel. If you're not familiar with who Bluebird Simulations is, they are the one development team currently developing a 757 and 767 for the Microsoft platform. And Boris is doing the sounds for that airplane. I don't know if you guys have heard the sound bites from that airplane, but holy hell, does that sound freaking good, man. I'm so excited to have that plane in the simulator. but again, it's just a matter of understanding. I want to be on the same page with the developers. I don't want to sit here at my desk going through their Discords or going through their forums pages saying, what's going on? You guys live streamed the update or the candidate release for the 777 2.5 months ago. Where's the airplane? That's just, I think, where people are getting frustrated with the flight simulation community.
Mike, another thing that I was going to bring up that you reminded me about is I was watching one of the I think it was AUS Summer doing a kind of a back overview of the release trailer and the release announcement that came out earlier this week. And one of the things that he was doing was saying, well, are the peripherals going to work, or are they not going to work? Nobody's saying whether all of my Bravo honeycomb stuff here is going to work. Now, you would figure with 2024, you would figure that it would, but nobody's saying anything definitive. And I think that's a real negative, as you're mentioning some of the negatives with these developers here. Is Are all the peripherals, are the Turtle Beach, is the Thrustmaster stuff that I have on hand now going to work with the new 2024? That's something that I think is real critical, of course, for the flight sim community. What do you think about some of that kind of stuff? Oh, Mike had to step away there, I see. Okay, we'll let him go. EJ, do you want to pick up on that a little bit then? And
Yeah.
let me know what you think.
So, having worked with Microsoft, who is a partner of VATSIM as well, they don't share stuff as freely as you think.
Right.
So, I think sometimes these developers, Turtle Beach and everybody else, might not actually know what it's going to take. I feel 95% confident all of that stuff is going to work because the drivers are still getting updated, and as long as that stuff is being supported hardware wise on Windows itself, I know there's going to be a way for them to work with 2024. It's just a matter of, is it going to be day one, which I doubt with Microsoft and the way that they do things with their levels or their layers of secrecy. But once that information is released and these developers actually have a chance, that's when I think we'll start to see all of those peripherals and other accessories get the support they need. And I think it's also one of the main reasons why planes were so hard this time around. You look at the development from the various versions of FSX to prepared, and you could kind of already start to see this happening, because with FSX, nothing changed for 10 years. It was working just fine. But then you got to prepared, and prepared would change things every now and again. And they weren't major changes, but they were just enough to break something. And so the code that they developed with FSX, now you saw these developers who were constantly having to update their stuff. They weren't used to doing that, and it created just some delays. So I remember Quality Wings is one of them that I purposely did not update prepared for a while so that my Quality Wings would work. I'm under the impression that MSFS was a complete rewrite. So for them to go and take a plane that they have, while they know the dynamics and they know the aircraft model, I think it took some effort to port that over. And we're seeing what that looks like, how much these developers are familiar with it. PMDG somehow was able to squeak by with the 737 and Aerosoft with the CRJ, which wasn't even really developed by Aerosoft, but they were able to get those things rolling. And then it's just like it took so much effort that they didn't really want to invest any more of that time or energy into getting into these next things. And a lot of that, though it's a problem with them, it's also a problem with the way that Microsoft works with third parties. And I am happy to at least see that there's some breakdown of that when you see them putting official builds with I&I planes inserted into that. It gives me some confidence that as we move into the next iteration, 2024, there's going to be a better partnership with these third-party developers and Microsoft Flight Simulator itself, and that's going to be a better win for our community and hopefully shorten the amount of time that it takes for Aerosoft or for PMDG or anybody else to complete an aircraft.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Mike, I don't know if did you hear my question?
I did not. I do apologize. My dog started barking out of absolutely nowhere, and I didn't know who was at the door, but it ended up just them being dogs.
Sounds like my miniature dachshunds. My question, and we have enjoyed seeing Ruby back there in the background too. That's awesome. My question was the peripherals that we have, the honeycomb, the Turtle Beach, the T-Master, the Thrustmaster stuff. Is all of that going to work and fairly seamlessly with 2024 when it comes out in November? What do you think?
I think EJ hit it on the head, hit the nail on the head. I couldn't agree anymore with what he said, right? Knowing, how large of a corporation Microsoft is, I would assume that their development team at least has access to these peripherals to where they can code them into the simulator. Or at least give the peripherals accessibility to the sim like they do in 2020, right? I don't see them not working because I think Microsoft 2024 is not an entirely new simulator. I think it's just a new build of what 2020 is. I think 2020 was the foundation for Microsoft to start working again, because that's kind of how it was with Microsoft back in the day, with Microsoft 98, 2000, 02, 2004, and then FSX. So they have a foundation now, and now it's just a matter of updating that foundation and bringing new stuff and keeping it current and up to date. So I could only assume that the peripherals like the Thrustmaster, like I hope that my Thrustmaster TCA Captain's Pack works when I plug it in for 2024, so I can give that 330 a shot that is in that trailer. That airplane looks outstanding in my opinion. So I don't see it being an issue. If anything, it'll probably be a day or two after sim release that there will be compatibility updates and all that kind of stuff with different hardware and new drivers that are going to be released for the peripherals by the manufacturers. Like Thrustmaster might have to release a new driver update for the Thrustmaster products, and same with Honeycomb and this, that, the third. I hope that's the case. I would hope that 2024 doesn't get released and a hurricane just comes through and destroys people's hopes and dreams about the simulator. I hope they learn their lesson after 2020's release, because even though they were out of the game for a lot of years, Microsoft is still a huge corporation. I don't want to talk negatively, because saying Microsoft 2020 is a fantastic simulator. But I can kind of compare it to, I don't know if there are any Call of Duty players in the chat, but it's like Activision. Activision is a huge worldwide multi-billion-dollar corporation, right? But they still can't get their game right. Does that make sense? So it's just, I think the development team from Microsoft has a huge understanding of what the community is expecting. So the fact that missions are coming back, I mean, me just being an oldie from the FSX days, like those Coast Guard search and rescue missions and the challenging landings and, the corporate flying and all that kind of stuff. I'm super excited to see all that. I just hope they did it correctly, so it's not, every time I load into a mission, the game is crashing or something like that. So I don't see it being an issue. I think Microsoft has a very, very, I think 2020 was their blueprint, and now they're just they're in 100% development mode.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's really encouraging, because, that was one of the things that some of these other videos that I've been watching on YouTube, they were real wishy-washy about it, back and forth. Will they work? Well, you've got to think so, but maybe they won't. But yeah, we figure that they probably will. So those are real good answers and very encouraging. So here's the thing. All right. It's midnight, November 17th. Are you going to download it and get it going right off, or are you going to wait a little while? I'm going to wait a little while myself and kind of see how things go before I want to change over or install a new hard drive and put 2024 over on that. What about you, Mike?
I think I'll tell you, Jack, when I was before content creation, I was very much in the same mind space as like, I'm going to give it an opportunity. I'm going to watch some live streams and I'm going to see if it's worth the money that I'm going to spend on it. Now being in content creation and having a YouTube platform, I believe that there's an expectation for those that fly flight simulation on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, whatever the platform you stream on. I think there's an expectation from viewers now to get an honest opinion from those that they watch on a regular basis. So now, am I expecting to get an early release copy of 2024? No, I am nowhere near to that status of content creator, right? But I think for the sanity of my channel and my viewers, I think that's going to have to be a necessity for me. Is I'm going to have to get it day one. So when it comes to being a content creator and when it comes to live streaming these products and all that kind of stuff, especially now with being sponsored by some people and receiving early release copies of different airports and all that kind of stuff, I think it's like I said, there's that expectation from your viewers. If you have something, it's like if Vertical Sim, he just re-announced that he's doing Palm Beach again. So I think the viewers are going to expect those who are sponsored by Vertical Sim to see it early enough so they can make a decision on whether to buy it or not. For me, like I said, I don't think I'm going to get an early release copy of 2024. I'm going to try, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think for content creators, it's a necessity, but for those that are just regular flight simmers, if you want to wait 2, 3, 4 weeks to let the simulator have a chance to be born and start walking, then I think that's a understandable point for just the regular everyday flight simmer. That's just my opinion on it.
No, that's great. I'm kind of with Scott at the moment. If you look in the chat, Scott says he'll wait. He'll wait a little bit on it. I'm going to watch you and Owls and see how it goes. That's that's what I'm going to do. EJ, what about you? What do you think? Are you going to go out at midnight when it's out and get it?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to, but not because I expect there to be problems. It's the difference in between when it's released and we start to see the planes that we want to fly there. If Ioni's got the A330, that's one fantastic plane that I'm looking forward to flying. I do want to see backwards compatibility and understand that a little bit more before I make the jump. But I also wanted to back up just a little bit to, when we look at will things work, I don't know that they will on day one. VATSIM has vPilot that worked with MSFS 2020 on day one. It didn't really work because they did not have the open access they needed to find stuff. Microsoft gave them a very limited ability to figure things out so they could make the tool. And then once the tool went live, they realized this is completely wrong. We need to change how it connects. We need to figure out how to do this without FSU IPC like we used to back in the day. It'll come. It's just not going to come on day one. So I will enjoy watching Owl's stream and watching Mike as you guys get to experience all of that hell. And then, once things start to calm down, I'll be there for the fun part of it. You have to remember, this is something that Microsoft has learned. They cannot ignore this community because, there was FSX and then there was 2020. But if you remember, there was something in between, something that was so horrible, we all try to forget it because I think it was called Flight. They ignored the community.
Yeah, Microsoft Flight.
They just ignored the community. They made the game based off of what they saw working on their other games of the time, and they had a lot of these expansion packs, these DLCs, and it just and they locked out third-party development. And they found out real quickly that when you lock out third-party development of a community that is built around third-party development, you really, really don't win your the audience that you want to win. So when they came back with 2020, they fixed that mistake, and I imagine that they have learned their lesson and they're going to continue to work closely with developers. They're just really bad about giving people access to early on. So within the first 90 days, I bet you it's going to be a completely different game than it was on midnight in November 17th. But when we get into the beginning of 2025, I'll probably be buying it.
That's
Yeah,
exciting.
I agree. I agree. And, I'm hoping that, like EJ was saying, that a lesson was learned throughout Microsoft's trials and tribulations that they've had over the last 4 years. And I would hope that, with my brain is constantly, the gears are constantly turning upstairs when I'm like trying to put together a thesis as to why things are happening the way they are right now. And I could only assume that in Limelight, right, that in a perfect world, that these developers already have access to it and that they're already hard at work porting their stuff over. And that by the time release day comes, that, within first couple of weeks of the sim being out, Phoenix says, hey, we're ready for you. Or PMDG says, hey, here's your 7.3 port. And by the way, here's your 777. We could only we could only hope, right? But
like the way you slide that in there.
Yeah. I mean, you could only hope that that's the case. But at the same time, I'm not expecting on day one, November 17th, to just load up into the Phoenix A320 into the INI Los Angeles and do a flight down to fly Tampa Vegas. I'm not expecting to do that.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that 2024, at least on the MickityyyMike channel, is probably going to be a mission series where we just fly all the missions and all that kind of stuff and see what the simulator has to offer. And I might do a review video when it comes to like graphics and what the airports look like, because that's something that I guess is one of Microsoft's major objectives with this simulator, is getting a little bit more into the realism when it comes to the commercial aspect of aviation. And it's in their trailer. I mean, I don't know what airport that is or where it's at, but it looks phenomenal. So, when it comes to the expectation, I'm not expecting to be able to load into all the third-party stuff that I have for Microsoft 2020 day one. You can only hope that Microsoft has said, hey, Phoenix, PMDG, INI, Synaptic, Fly-by-Wire, so on and so forth, all your scenery developers, I could only hope that they said, hey, we're 6 months from release. Here is all the stuff that you need to start working. Now it's on you. We can only hope that's what they did, but realistically, probably not. That's just when my gears start turning. That's the synopsis that I come up with.
No, that's a real good way to start questioning it and asking those questions. Guys, I want to thank everybody for watching. If you haven't smashed that thumbs up button yet, please do so. Sure would appreciate that. EJ, I'm going to ask you a question here. We're coming up on 2 hours, guys. I can keep going a little while if you want. Just depends on what you've got time for. But EJ, I'm going to ask you the question and that I asked Mike and Al's and CST on one of our first streams here. So it's kind of the inaugural initiation question for the group. How about that? And believe it or not, Mike, I asked Captain Canada this one time on his streams in chat. And he said, "Ooh, that's a bit of a loaded question," but he did a real good explanation on what he thought about it, and maybe we'll ask him that when he's in here live. So I won't speak for him. But EJ, Microsoft Flight Simulator, a game or a simulator?
That is a great question. Actually, it's part of the biggest internal debates that we have within VATSIM. It honestly is the heart of a lot of issues that we face, because MSFS is a game, and the way some of these planes control. And I remember joining one of Mike's streams when he was doing the that new 787 that came out. And he was talking about how when you take off, it felt more heavy. It felt like a real 787 versus when you take the Kurosim or the default 787-10 out, and you just lift back on the axis, and as the plane is climbing, it just feels like a toy plane, because it's not designed to work with flight simulator controls like we're used to. It's designed for an Xbox controller.
Yep.
And when the game just came out, and I do think that MSFS, when it came out as a game, I saw a lot of my favorite streamers, one guy in particular that I used to watch growing up, named Jacksepticeye. He's a
Oh, yeah.
he's a really famous streamer, and he played MSFS on a few streams. And guess what he used? An Xbox controller.
Yeah.
So what Microsoft did is they tried to blend the two things together. And why that's an issue is because us people on VATSIM who are serious about controlling and are serious about, like, actually teaching people and having educational experiences, MSFS isn't really built towards that as much. Prepared was a true simulator.
Yes.
And that's why Prepared is the way it is, where the graphics aren't great, but that's why there's still development on there. Not necessarily with PMDG and those folks, but the Lockheed Martin is still putting money behind it because it's what has continued to be a main training point for a lot of pilots.
Yeah, I mean, P3D has a huge commercial aspect, from what I understand. Huge commercial aspect when it comes to flight schools and training and full motion simulators. There are a lot that use P3D as a platform, I heard.
Exactly. So MSFS is like this melting point where they're trying to put the two things together. And to Microsoft's credit, they've done a decent job of making people happy. It's what we're running into right now that is affecting the major simulator fans. Because if you wanted to get an A350 into MSFS, you can do it. You can get most any type of plane into MSFS. It's just not accurate. But that whole development thing of trying to make them realistic, trying to make them simulators, it's just not coming very naturally, because that's not the way that MSFS is set up. It's set up to be controlled by an Xbox controller, enjoyed more casually, and not the serious simming experience that we have set up for it. So MSFS is a game. Flight Simulator in its entirety is not.
A couple of comments that I have here real quick is, and Mike's aware of this. A couple of weeks ago, I got to go to the United Flight Training Center here in Denver and experience the real thing, the full motion 787 Dreamliner simulator. And I landed the thing every time. He would, put me off 30 miles from whatever airport and said, okay, fly the approach. And I did all that and landed in, but I was surprised at how bad the graphics were. Nowhere near the level of what we, have on our computer screens here. And, I tongue in cheek say this, I envy Mike and Al's and CST because, these guys are all the time getting these minus 134s and these minus 146 and this minus, I think the worst I've seen Al's do, he did do a little over, a minus 200 one day. I think I might have even seen you do one of them, Mike, but that's extremely rare.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our days,
Yeah, and that's where for me that's where kind of the game aspect comes in, and of course I can't get below a minus 220 at least consistently. I've done some minus 134s and some 45s and so on and so forth, so that's good. But I for me that landing number is almost part of the game where I'm chasing the owls and the MickityyyMikes of the world, trying. But you guys bring them in nice and beautiful, and it's fun. Sometimes I think we're a little too serious about those landing rate numbers when I'm not streaming.
So, I don't mean
worry
to cut you
about
off, but
no, you're fine.
To be honest with you, and I used to be this guy. I used to be the guy that wanted just the greasiest of landings. I wanted I wanted the less than negative 50s. I wanted this, that, the third. But then I started really understanding aviation and the technicalities around the markings on the runways and all that kind of stuff. And then I was sitting here realizing it's like, well, yeah, nobody felt the plane touch the ground, but I've got 2,000 foot of runway left, and I'm at 148 knots on approach or on landing with full reverse thrust, and my toe brakes are at the max on the floorboard, right? So when it comes down to the game aspect for me, it's the same thing. It's like, as many people know, me and Owls have this little rivalry going on about who can land a plane better.
Oh yeah.
And that's where the game kind of sits for me. It's just like, at the end of the day, I know Owls can fly. Owls does things sometimes better than I've ever seen any other flight simmer do it, right? And we have our days where we fly and execute an approach beautifully, where we hit the numbers on the runway and our G-force is at 1.0 and we got a negative, 150 on the landing rate. But in reality, that stuff isn't considered at all in the real world.
Right.
As long as the airplane is on the ground and it doesn't have to go to the hangar and get maintenance done on it, and it was a legal landing by the FAA standards or whatever governing body that governs the aviation airspace and over the Atlantic and down in Asia and all that kind of stuff. As long as the airplane's on the ground and
the passengers aren't dead. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, for me, at the end of the day now, at least, like, obviously for the viewers, I do my best to land the airplane as best I can. But, I'm more concerned with legality than I am with smoothness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes down to like whether is it a game or not, there are some aspects of the game. I saw CJ said it perfectly in the chat. He said, I feel like some parts of it can be considered arcade or in the style of a game, and other parts can be considered simulation. I think that's a great way of putting it. There are some very arcadey things about Microsoft and all that kind of stuff, but that's the beautiful thing. I think EJ hit the nail on the head with it too. Is like you can make it a game, or you can make it a simulator. For those that fly around with all the UI on the screen, where you can see your speed and altitude and direction of flight and all that kind of stuff. That's where you can consider it an arcade game, right? But there's some people that actually use it for real world purposes, or you can just turn everything off and get as much realism as you possibly can. My dream would just to be download a simulator that's depicted the real world at some point, to where turbulence is a thing, where you don't have to purchase a $25 third-party add-on to have turbulence on your flight when you're descending through clouds and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
Not having to purchase a third-party weather program or graphics program to make the sim look a little bit more realistic, And I've always said this: if Laminar Research and Microsoft would partner together and build a sim together, that'd be ideal, But that would never happen, obviously. But
yeah.
When it comes to like you were saying, the whole landings and all that kind of stuff, I'll sit here and sweat my ass off to prove a point to owls, right?
Right.
but at the end of the day, as long as I get the airplane on the ground and I'm relatively within the touchdown zone, whether it be the 1,000 footers, 1,500 footers, 2,000 footers, whatever it might be, yeah, it's crazy too, because you see all these viewers, they put the float, they say we floated the landing, but it's like, what do you mean? I'm in the touchdown zone.
Yeah.
Float to me is I've touched down 6,000 feet down the runway and I've only got a few thousand feet remaining to stop the airplane. That's a float to me.
Yeah.
In reality, that should have been a go around, but that's just, I like the game aspect, but at the same time, I try to be as realistic as possible when it comes to the technicality of flying.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to show you guys. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this in real time or not, but I'm going to play a landing, one of my first landings here in the Phoenix A320. Hopefully, you guys will be able to see this. But this was nice. I was really happy with this, but it still ended up. I think this graded as a minus 300 landing. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this in real time. No, that one actually wasn't the minus 300. That was beautiful. Okay, never mind. That was not the example that I needed to use. But I hear everything that you're saying, and I think that's the thing for me, more importantly than anything, is that we have the legality of the landing. I did a landing in Medford, Oregon last night, first time flying into there, and I mean those wheels, I floated. I mean it was just a pretty as ground effect float, and the wheels touched down right at the end of the last white marker. So it was probably barely legal or not, but a lot of fun. And let's see, I think we've got some good comments there in the chat, Mike, that you might want to go back to. EJ, what do you think about all this?
I just like as much as I like the simulator aspect of it, I do like the fun of competing with friends over the landing rate. It's not the most important thing, but I will be the first to admit that I don't necessarily want to have the full simulator experience. Like for instance, with Quality Wings, I got to the point where I didn't care about getting all the APU process correctly in the right order. So just Control E, start the engines. I don't care. But I don't know. I just kind of like the balance of having realism, but at the same time, it's something I'm doing for enjoyment. I don't want to get to the point where I'm using the Xbox controller to fly. There's this guy who does YouTube shorts where he's doing these ridiculous approaches with the controller. I don't want to get to that point.
Yeah. So I know who you're talking about. He's doing like 90 knot crosswinds and a 777 with a PS4 controller. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one. So I just need a happy medium somewhere in between. And I think most people edge towards being in that medium to being where Mike is at, with, you know, more concerned with the legality and of the landing than the vertical speed at landing, FPM. But, you know, it also kind of goes to show the differences of the people who are involved in Flight Simulator. Me, myself, I have some desire to go get a pilot's license, but really I'm more happy to be sitting there in first class and sipping champagne while Mike is doing the work out there in the front. And I'm just enjoying the views. And I know there are people who are like me who do a lot of flying. I've been to 40 countries in my life. I fly almost every week in real life. And to me, I'm happy as can be just in row 1A. But then, you know, there are people who are really about let's have the real and true experience. And that's what makes Flight Sim so wonderful. And I kind of like what MSFS does, and the fact that it combines the arcade all the way to the most realistic. It's a good melting pot to attract the attention of a lot of people from different ideations or different perfect examples of what they want out of Flight Simulator.
Yeah, it's and that's just to the point of where I think Microsoft did it correctly, as much as people might not want to agree with it, is they gave the customer the option to make the sim what they want it to be, right? So you can make it a game, or you can make it as realistic as possible. You know, are there some things that could be tweaked here and there for the realism aspect? Yes, but at the same time, as EJ pointed out, this was not a game this was not a simulator that was pinpointed directly for the PC aspect or for the flight simulator aspect. It was built in integration for Xbox users, right? So, and I think this is the first time a flight simulator's ever been able or available to be played on a console, right? Which I think is fantastic, because it's opened up a market to people that don't have the opportunity to have a, you know, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 PC build sitting to the right of them. You know, this is a $300 piece of equipment that can run a flight simulator. You know, that there might be this, you know, 11, 12-year-old kid that doesn't have a computer that flies on Microsoft because he has a love for aviation, but just doesn't have the access to the things that we do. So I'm hoping that Microsoft 2024 can sit a little bit more on the realism side, but still has the ability to be that arcade game that those that enjoy playing it like that can still play it like that. I just hope that Microsoft has taken into account where their market is, because I still think the market is where the flight simulators are, you know, or the flight simulation enthusiasts are.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I tell you, it's been a great afternoon. We've got some great comments going on in the chat. Mike, if you want to review a few of those. I was just looking back up here and seeing CJ Flies and Scott have been having a little bit of a conversation. There's some great comments in there, Mike, if you want to take a look and comment on any of those.
Yeah. I think... So Scott said sometimes you don't want to. When I would land on a 5,000-foot runway in my jet, was all about getting it on and slowing the plane. Smoothest is out the window, and I think that's a very accurate representation, especially coming from a real-world pilot.
Yeah.
Because like when I fly into airports such as like Burbank or Santa Ana or anything like that, those that are decently sized commercial airports or international airports that have, you know, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 foot runways. Like he said, smoothness is out the door. And I say it on my stream. It's like, hey, guys, we're flying into Burbank. Don't be expecting any butter
right.
emojis to be set into the chat. We're getting her down on the markers. And the last time I flew into Burbank, you know, it was on the markers, but it was in the flight simulation aspect or in the flight simulation expectations. It was a hard landing because the FPM said -350. And it's like, yeah, but in real world, you look at the G-force, it said 1.02. So it was a little bit of a higher load on G's because it's a little bit of a harder landing because you're landing on a shorter runway. But at the same time, look at the technicality of the landing. It's like, forget what the FPM says. Forget what your vertical speed is. You know, if you can consider what the legality is are my struts through the freaking wings? No, they're not. You know, they're they're still intact. You know, there was some strut compression on that landing, but you know, I didn't put the landing gear through the wings, you know, or anything like that.
Boy, you're making me feel so much better. Thank you.
I mean, it's
spoken just like a Southwest pilot.
exactly right.
What would a Ryanair pilot say? No, never.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the goal in real life is under 600 foot per minute. I could be wrong though. I think I don't think airlines monitor vertical speed or foot per minute on landing. It's all about the G load, if I'm not mistaken, and the legality of the landing when it comes to the touchdown zone. So I think that's a big myth in real world aviation about foot per minute. I think that's really a flight simulator thing. It's not a real world aviation thing that's monitored. Scott says legality touchdown and 1,000 foot in the touchdown markers. That's ATP standards in the real world. Yep, that's it agrees. That I mean that's real world stuff. So, let me see. Scott also says about simulation, it's supposed to be fun. After my career, I want it to be fun, not work anymore. Yeah, I could agree with that 100%.
Sure. Yeah.
Dom said when he used to fly, he didn't care how smooth it landed. Just mattered the fact that I got it down. Yep. Yeah, and it's it's the same thing when I was flying. You know, my flight instructor was not worried about the smoothness. More so concerned about technicality and getting the airplane down to the expectations of the instructor. Really. See, I know they were talking about the Bing map enhancement, all that kind of stuff too.
You know, speaking of that, I'll just touch on this real quick. I am really hoping that one thing for me that I'm really hoping is that 2024 will take away the need for these enhancement packages and all of these kind of add-ons and extra things that you have to run. That's one thing I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, guys,
just one comment on that.
Yeah.
The package, when you're installing that, if you decide to run it, make sure you read the manual fully, because if it's made by the same people that made the last one, that was the Google Maps update, they made it very clear that if you decide that, hey, this isn't going to work, or if Bing shifts something internally, which they've done in the past, you may have to reinstall or to repair MSFS so that it goes back to the standard textures. That was something that happened a year and a half or 2 years ago. I don't know if it's the same developer, but I would just say read the FAQ, make sure you understand exactly how it works. I don't know. I haven't tried to run it yet. I just know that was a thing the last time.
Yeah, I don't think this is a problem this time with that, because the guy in his video actually does make a distinction about those two with the Bing map enhancements. So I'm pretty comfortable that's not the case, but you're absolutely right. You should read up and kind of know ahead of time before you start making modifications, for sure.
This brings me to a point of those that are in the flight simulation community. Guys, flight simulation, there are thousands of third-party add-ons available for this game, right? There's a beautiful thing that comes with all these downloadable files. It's called a README file. It says README in all capital letters, right? Do not disregard that file. Just because it has nothing to do with the files that you have to install into the game does not mean that it should not be clicked on. Okay, it says README in bold capital letters for a reason.
Yeah.
Make sure you guys are reading the fine print before you install something into your simulator, because I cannot count. I can count. If I had $1 for every time someone came into my chat saying I installed something, but my sim's not working anymore, I would be out of work. I'd be working from home, doing my flying, right? Make sure you guys are reading the manuals of these third-party installations, because one thing you can do will screw your entire sim, and you're going to be starting from ground zero, having to uninstall and reinstall a simulator. Like you guys saw, I'm case in point. I just had to bring my computer into a computer shop and have Windows completely reinstalled and restart Microsoft from the ground up because something was installed incorrectly because I did not read the fine print, and that was on me. So make sure you guys are reading the README files in these downloads when you're doing third-party installations, especially for stuff like map enhancement mods and editing the INI files for an airplane and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, you can screw something up, and these developers will say, Not my problem. You bought the airplane, you edited it, we told you not to. Can't do anything for you. Sorry. So make sure you guys are reading the README files.
It's always a real good point of practice too. Like Mike saying with the INI files is make a copy of it and list that INI file as .old, your original, so it's easy to go back to it and have it there as a backup in case your system gets totally screwed up. Well, guys, I tell you, I think we should probably wrap up here pretty soon. EJ, it's been wonderful to have you aboard with us. We'll look forward to your expertise and so much more as time goes on. If you have the time for us, we're trying to do these a couple of 3 times a month, and want to thank you so much for your participation, and great to see you in here today.
Yeah, fantastic. And I hope to see you guys come join us on VATSIM. If you're new, of course, we welcome the new ones as well. It's our job, people like me, to do training. So I'm happy if you guys share my contact information as well by email, my VATSIM email. I can share that type of stuff. And then, we can help with training and stuff like that. We want to get you brought in. And one thing to Mike as well, Mike mentioned something about an automated CTAF system so that when you're getting close to landing, it reminds you. I just mentioned that to the tech team, Mike, and tech team thinks that's pretty interesting. So if you see that feature anytime soon, know that's thanks to Mike.
Sorry if you guys don't like the VATSIM pings, but it's a necessity to have, because you can't just sit here and mute vPilot and not expect a supervisor to reach out to you and say, why aren't you contacting us? Right. But it's the same thing for CTAF. I think that's a great integration. And if the tech team does it, hell, hey, don't shoot the messenger, but y'all gonna fly on the network. There's expectations, right? So no, it was a fantastic discussion, guys. If you guys are going to be at the expo this weekend, please make sure to keep an eye out for me. I will be there all 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Mrs. Mama Mikey will be there on Friday and Sunday as well, so you guys will get to meet my better half. Looking forward to really seeing all you guys and, give you a tour of the city and all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of us are talking about getting dinner together and doing some plane spotting at Harry Reid and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a good time. So if you guys are not registered for the expo, make sure you head over to their website. If I'm not mistaken, if you subscribe to their captain's program, I think it's $30 a year. If you subscribe to that, I believe you can get 20% off of a full admission ticket for all 3 days if you are planning on going to the expo. So make sure you guys check them out. And if you guys are planning on being at Expo, keep an eye out for me. Owls will be there. Fly with Lotto will be there. CST is going to be there now. Captain Canada, Blue Games, XP72, and a plethora of others. I've caught wind that V1 Simulations might be there too. So really looking forward to seeing all you guys. And I'm looking forward to the future of flight simulation. I have been loving these discussions and all that kind of stuff. And for those that are in chat, I apologize. I'll wrap it up here now. But those that are in chat that are viewers of mine as well, again, I apologize for the lack of streams over the last week. Like I said, life has just kind of slapped me in the face, with preparing to swap shifts at work and getting a wedding planned and all that kind of stuff. I've had to, reprioritize some things. So hoping to be back live again, not tomorrow, but Monday. I'm going to try and do a live stream because I just caught wind from my employer that my shift swap has been delayed. So Monday, 10 o'clock in the morning, Pacific Standard Time, we'll be out in Europe doing Helsinki to Copenhagen round trip in the 320. So I'll see you guys all there.
Mike, it's going to be so good to have you back on the air. I depend on you a lot of days when I'm here working in the home office. I've got you up on the screen while I've got all the work stuff up on this one. So really looking forward to having you back. You've been sorely missed, and it's good to see you this afternoon. Thank you, man.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. EJ, I'll tell you, it's been wonderful to have you. What a blessing, and your expertise and level of knowledge. I look forward to some more of our group chats, and I am actually going to try to figure out a way to actually get this up on a real podcast site. So as Paul Harvey used to say, and most of you are probably not young enough or old enough to know who Paul Harvey is, stand by for news. We'll get all that stuff together and and put it there. Guys, don't forget to also, in addition to Mike's channel, go on over to Al's channel there if you would, and give him a subscribe and like if you haven't already at this point. And then, of course, there's our other member here, CST Gaming. Mello is in live stream right now, so if you guys get a chance, hop over to his channel and check out what he's got going on. Also, don't forget to check out Fly with Kay for some of the great videos that she does, and just incredible content providers right here on YouTube for you guys. And we couldn't be more happy and proud to be associated with them and to be becoming good friends and trying to help out what we can in the flight sim community. So, Mike, I'll let you do the virtual flight deck send off, and then we'll go ahead and get out of here. Unless you guys have any more closing comments.
No, I just want to give a huge shout out to the VATSIM Caribbean division. They're a fantastic group of guys. So if you guys have not done any flying down in the Caribbean as of recent, make sure you go do some flying down there. Some beautiful scenery, beautiful airports, some challenging approaches. So again, make sure you know your equipment. And go and give them a shout. You can join the VATSIM Caribbean Division Discord here. I will see if I can post the link here in the chat.
Good call.
I don't know if Nightbot is going to time me out for posting this, but we'll try it out. You guys can go ahead and join the VATSIM Caribbean Division Discord there. And feel free to get in contact with EJ with any questions or anything like that if you wish to do so. And again, huge shout out to my channel sponsors, Vertical Sim and Exonos. And I will see you guys all at the expo this weekend from the virtual flight deck, guys. I'll see you.
Mike, EJ, thanks, buddy. We will see you next time. And guys, we'll look for you. I'm going to be out this week. I'm not going to have a stream on Wednesday night. I am going to try to go to a 2 times a week stream as well. But in the meantime, God bless you. Peace and long life. Captain Jack signing off. You guys take care, and we will see you again.